A key aspect of innovation is having the ability to see the world from different perspectives, right? And I think there's multiple ways to try to practice this ability. In thinking about it, you need to be able to bring different concepts from different disciplines. That's one of the key aspects of being an innovative person, is being able to bridge two disparate ideas or concepts to make something new that we haven't before. One way is to actually study innovators like we've been doing on the Noble Innovation podcast, but my wife and I came up with a new way of trying to do that. So Lala, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about QuoteCast?
Yes, of course. So hi, everyone. My name is Lala Forrest. I'm currently a resident physician in the psychiatry program at Yale University, and I'm very happy that Brooks asked me to be here today. So today we're going to do our first ever episode of QuoteCast.
Ooh.
Yes, it's very exciting. So here's a little rundown of what we're going to be doing. So Brooks brought home this awesome book from a bookstore downtown in New Haven, Connecticut. It's the new Yale Book of Quotations, and there are phenomenal quotes here, quoting various individuals, many individuals. And what we're doing for the QuoteCast is we're kind of randomly picking 3 different quotes. We're not looking up the person in advance. It does give like a one-liner of who the person is, their lifespan, and we're going to just read the quotes, 3 quotes, and then we're going to talk about them.
Yeah, thinking about it, I think it's such an interesting concept to think words mean different things to different people, right? And it does help to have the context of the individual. And, that's what the other version of Noble Innovation is, to do a deep dive into that real context of what was going on in an individual or an innovator's life. What I think is cool about this is just without filters, we can just have discussions of what comes to mind. And hopefully this is part of a practice that we're engaging in, that you're engaging in as you listen to this and think about it in your own life, of how can I try to understand someone else's perspective? Being able to understand other people's perspective. I mean, you're in psychiatry. That's like the whole name of the game, right? Is how can I best help people? What are ways that I can actually be an effective individual? And it really helps to try to understand the other person. So that's really what we're trying to do here.
Yeah.
So you picked these 3. How what was your process?
I literally just opened the book and I just started scanning through different quotes, and whichever quote spoke to me, resonated with me, made me want to think further, inspired me, are the 3 quotes that I picked for today.
All right, let's get started.
Okay, so the first quote is by Friedrich Nietzsche. He's a German philosopher. He was born in 1844 and passed in 1900. So he says, "Convictions are more dangerous enemies of truth than lies."
Can you say it one more time?
Yeah. So convictions are more dangerous enemies of truth than lies. And I'll start by just saying I picked this quote because of a conversation that we were having yesterday, on which you came home and you attended this event at Sci City, which I'm sure you'll can talk more about. But I remember you coming back and you were listening to this keynote speaker who came and talked at this event, and you were basically saying the number one, or one of the most important things that an individual can have when starting their own company is conviction or passion, which is pretty similar.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that was at Yale Ventures. So that's the new position I have this year, is trying to help faculty commercialize their products into new companies. So we're hearing from it was an angel investor that was telling us what he looks for in entrepreneurs and founders and the 10 key traits. And the first one, was, integrity, right? And this actually ties well into this quote, because the difference between truth and lies, right? He was basically saying that if the worst thing you can do in any relationship is lie, right? And that way you know that from then on, you can't trust someone. He actually said, and it's hilarious because I love making fun of these little quips. He said, the worst thing you can say is to tell you the truth, because that qualifier just means that anything else they say could be a lie, could be fake, could be false. And that's like, I used to joke, like, to be frank, and it's like, you just imagine embodying a new identity that happens to be frank. That these weird things that people say without thinking, but that part that there's a difference between truth and lying and integrity. The second character trait that he said that he needed to see in someone starting their own venture, their own business, or being a leader in any way. So this can be extrapolated right to even within your family, being a leader and try to set example for your kids or something like that, or being at the gym and trying to, lead the class around you, is having passion or conviction that you believe that what you're doing is the most important thing that you could be doing, and that you're just living in consistency with your values. And I think that what Nietzsche is starting to say is that there's a difference between having that passion, that conviction, that belief in something that is grounded in truth versus something that's, grounded in a lie. And, I don't know. I'm going to have to think about it more.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm so happy that you brought up I don't know how many times I've heard you say, or like kind of make fun of when people say, to be honest, or, to tell the truth. And it's interesting, especially in psychiatry, words matter. And then at many times when we're interviewing patients, trying to build rapport, talking to our friends even, you realize, and if you're, kind of insightful or take time to reflect, like, why did I just say that? Right. What was the purpose of me saying that? And usually the answer is like, oh, it's just kind of like this unconscious way to respond in conversation. So I think psychiatry is a really interesting field to think about, like, why is this the norm, this phrase? Why do we preface conversations like this? So I'm glad to hear you brought that up. But going back to the quote, I thought it was, so like the quote is saying, right, convictions are more dangerous enemies of truth than lies. So this is basically saying, how I'm interpreting this is that conviction is more dangerous, aka more powerful of an influence than actual lies themselves. Everybody kind of tends to think, if you're lying, right, that could be like the worst thing possible for a person, or like the most dangerous situation to kind of be in. And sure, that's true, very valid. But at the same time, we often overlook the power of conviction that people have. And that could be sometimes, I don't want to say like negative sometimes. It could be detrimental for some people at times, but then it could also be advantageous. But, in terms of like the detrimental part, people can be manipulated by conviction. But it could be advantageous if you do have this trait, conviction, in starting your own company or feeling so passionate about something that you feel like you want to share it with the world.
Yeah, and I'm thinking even more now as you're describing an enemy of truth is, what even is truth? And I was having a conversation with Sam Wilkinson, he's a professor at Yale in psychiatry also, on testing things that you can actually find out whether or not it's true or not. So this is like the scientific method. You have to ask a hypothesis that you can actually test to see whether it was true or false. And there's certain questions that exist that, given the set of tools that we have in the world right now, you actually can't come to a ground truth in terms of answering those questions, right? Like, of course, this classic one is like, what is God, right? That's like, that's very hard to actually have a ground truth answer to that sort of question. But things like, it's raining outside, is verifiable. And so then there's everything in between that, right? Which Nietzsche is probably describing, right? Where if someone is very passionate about something that can never be proven true or never be proven false, that can become very dangerous because people don't have enough information to form their own ideas about it. And so you can end up just blindly following somebody's passion. And so I think that's part of having a very clear set of values that you live by is something that can help you, align your conviction in a noble way, a way that has the potential to do the most good for yourself and people that you know and love and are surrounded by. Because there's many things, not every single decision in life will was that the best decision I could have made. And you'll never know that.
Right.
And that's probably most things in life.
Yeah.
So I think that might be where Nietzsche's getting at, is that among all of the decisions that we make, that you'll never be able to know what the right decision is. Be wary of how conviction, whether it's your own or somebody else's, can influence your decisions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree. I think what my main lesson that I'm learning from this quotation and us talking about it is exactly that, is conviction is a powerful thing. And it's really important moving forward when I interact with people who are passionate, excited in whatever content that they're talking about or showcasing. Always just have in the back of your head, be wary, or what are their intentions, right? And always check in with yourself. And does this align with your own moral principles moving forward? Because again, it's a slippery slope.
Yeah, I love the concept of understanding where the words and ideas are coming from. Everybody is driven by different incentives, whether intentional or not, right? Like when there's, especially for career advice or life advice, right? You really need to understand where that individual is coming from when you're having a conversation with them, and trying your best to say, clearly hopefully you believe they have your best intention. Mm-hmm. However, advice, I heard it somewhere, it was actually in a song, that advice is only, recounting stories in your past life that you wish you would have done differently. So basically, if I were to give you advice about something, it's just because I've experienced a similar problem and I did what I thought is the wrong thing. So my advice to you is say, oh, you're in this problem, you should just do what I didn't do.
Yeah.
And you hear all the time, don't take advice from me. Oh, I messed up. You're like, all right, whatever. You're still in the position that you are, and we're having this conversation. Yeah. So I think that's a funny cop out, that people don't listen to me,
Okay, so I'm going to shift, if you're ready, to our second quote.
Dude, this is hard. This is harder than I thought. So it'll be good to continue to practice this.
Yeah, I agree. But I really enjoy this. I think this is really amazing. Because I feel like there's very little time in my day-to-day life, and I'm sure, right, with everybody who's working so hard and trying to accomplish their goals and balance and everything like that, but to spend time having conversation about these important topics. And I don't know how many times, I was going to say this earlier, but I don't know how many times I have attended conferences, talks, even lectures. And you hear somebody, the speaker, or even a person that you meet, say a line or a series of lines, and you're just like, wow, right?
You're like, yo, run that back real quick.
Can I hit the rewind button?
Yo,
I need to write this down, which I try to do. I try to write these amazing things that people say. So that's why I'm particularly excited about the QuoteCast here.
Yeah. And if you are interested in storing quotes, I think it's cool to pull these out. And I think, especially as we learn more about it and think about them, and you can understand that quotes literally are just a succinct message that can give you a much larger idea or, concept about something.
Yeah, definitely. And we all have our own interpretations, right? That's exactly what this is about. So our second quote is by an individual called V.S. Naipaul. Do you think I'm pronouncing that correctly?
V.S. Naipaul.
Naipaul.
V.S. So I guess we would have to look up their first and second name. N-A-I Paul. Naipaul.
So they're a
Trinidadian novelist.
Yes.
So from Trinidad.
And then you can go ahead and introduce their year as well.
All right. Born in 1932 and passed away in 2018. And so this quote is actually from, oh, okay, so we're doing this quote up here.
Yes.
So this quote is from 1979 from, I guess, a book, chapter 2 of A Bend in the River. So the quote is, and I'll read it twice, "It isn't that there's no right and wrong here. There's no right. It isn't that there's no right and wrong here. There's no right." So this sounds like a psychiatrist picked this quote.
I mean, that's what happened. But why do you say that?
So, like, when talking with you, it's like, I mean, and it's true, right? Everyone has their own motivations and decisions and viewpoints of the world, and inevitably, like, one of the inevitable aspects of being human is adaptability, right? I mean, this is many living organisms to have survived to this point in the history of Earth needed to be adaptable and to overcome problems. And so there's no way that at the time or throughout history, throughout your life, that you could have made right and wrong choices. And this is in part too, it's how you respond to setbacks and things, even when it is quote unquote wrong. So I think that regardless of a decision, you can't qualify it as right or wrong. It's just that there are decisions that are made and that there are ideas that are had. And an essential quality of being human is the ability to adapt and respond.
Yeah, I want to ask you, why do we have a tendency, and by we I mean human beings have a tendency to say, this is bad, this is good, this is the right thing to do, this is a terrible thing to do?
Yeah, I mean, I would like to hear your thoughts too, but I think that a lot of people like direction. I think that, and it's the same with like a checklist, like the way that a checklist is so satisfying is that once you've done the thing on the checklist, a decision has been made, a task has been done, you feel productive and you get a little boost of motivation from having decisions made. And I think that's important. I think that that's actually, an adaptive trait of humans and people is to be able to make decisions and move on. I think that, this is like thinking fast and slow. It's like we shouldn't be expending so much effort on every single decision that we have to make. Because that would just be paralyzing, right? You actually would never make any decisions if you philosophize over every single decision in your life. It's cool. And I think it's important for, people to like think and reflect and have these thoughts. But I think that there's that balance, and in part it is adaptive to just have an answer, have a yes or a no, a right or a wrong, a bad or a good, so that you can move through your life with a little bit more easily. Mm-hmm. So I think that that's sort of in defense of the binary classification of decisions. Yeah.
That's funny when you said that. I couldn't help but think like, there's the metabolism coming out in you. Well, I was just thinking, right? Like if you have to exert so much energy all the time, it's just really inefficient. Mm-hmm. So that's why your body has these mechanisms in place to reallocate energy, to conserve energy. So that way you can save it when you really need it.
True.
But to me, I really love talking about this topic of like right and wrong. I don't know what it is, but it just really fires me up. I think it's because I was definitely a person who had that tendency to say, am I doing the right thing? Is this the right thing to do? Oh my gosh, am I doing the wrong thing? And it's definitely something that I think in hindsight held me back. And it wasn't until
what age what age came to your mind when you're describing this version of you?
I think in high school, early college years. I mean, and to be honest, I still struggle with that, right? Especially when I'm seeing patients and taking care of them and trying to manage and find the best plan moving forward with them. Am I doing the right thing? Do I order the right labs, right? It's something that's still ongoing.
Yeah. In medicine, we have tests though for what's right and wrong. The board exams is right and wrong, and that's it's necessary for certain things. Like you definitely want any profession to have a baseline level of the general understanding that we all agree on as medical professionals is there's a more right and a more wrong. Obviously in real life, like it's never like UWorld. It's never like the actual text, the questions that we use to practice. But
I guess for me though, what really has helped me was actually watching a movie on Netflix, and I'm pretty sure it's called The Shack, I want to say. We'll double check and put that in our notes.
Is this a scary movie?
It's not a scary movie. And it's actually a movie that I would not normally watch because I do love horror movies. It's not scary at all. It's actually a really sad movie. It's about this guy.
I'm ready to cry right now.
No, I'll be very brief. It's about this dad who ends up going on a camping trip with his family, and the daughter gets lost or like kidnapped overnight, like when they're camping. Terrible story. They end up not being able to find the daughter. So it's actually like this confliction with, a religious component of like, I'm pretty sure this person was religious. But like, why does God or the creator or whatever, concept that they believed in allow such a horrible thing to happen? Right? This is so bad. This is so terrible. And the movie, it's very well done. And it basically explores and challenges that concept. And it comes out at the end of there is no wrong or right. There is no terrible and good. Like we're all so interconnected in such a way that it's impossible to differentiate that. So if something bad happens to a person, what if because that bad thing happened, another good thing happened for a different individual? And so it's like, so who, how do you balance that? And I think that is an overall appreciation, a newfound appreciation I have about that topic.
Yeah. I think that, for example, like this reminds me of this old quote of like, one man's trash is another man's treasure. I don't think that's exactly where you're going with that, but
yeah,
just the fact that setting up that argument and the argument that you said just says that these three entities, so let's just use what I was saying. So there's two people and one item, for example. Those two people live in the same society such that that item can be exchanged between them in some way, right?
Yeah.
That has to be true in order for this quote to have any relevance, right? So these two individuals actually live in the same world, and they have completely different perspectives on, what that item can bring value to them or their life or whatever. And who knows? It could apply to anything, just like the story that you're saying, where people could think that something's the end of the world,
or the end of their life.
True.
Maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. And then that brings us back to the conviction. Yeah, I can't even get it. I'm a little thrown off by that because that was pretty. What were you thinking about that?
Well, I was thinking that you were saying that you get challenged in the sense of like saying, oh, this is the end of the world. And maybe you're going in a different line with that, but at the same time, it's, I guess, like I'm thinking the similarity of like, this is a potential end is near. That's what I was thinking.
Interesting.
And the desperation comes out, right? When you're desperate, I feel like it's, again, right? Your body has this magical way of trying to initiate the most efficient way, right?
Yeah.
And that's why when you're desperate and in need, I think it's easy for us to say, this is the right thing or this is the bad thing, and to have these binary labels.
Yeah. I definitely want to, this reminds me of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. That I've been interested in this. It actually came across when I was studying for step 2, like something related to Maslow. Like there was very little psychology in it. But I was like, let me actually read this. And I looked at the original 1940 essay that he wrote on the hierarchy of needs. And it starts with safety, with physiological needs, right? Like an individual who has no food, hasn't eaten or slept for days, even if they see $1 million, they'd rather sleep than have $1 million, because that money will mean nothing to them in that state.
Yeah.
So let's say they slept, they've eaten and whatever. The next is safety, right? Like, okay, now that I'm fed, now I realize I'm in an unsafe surrounding. Now I need to actually find a stable, whether it's a job, an income, a home, or something like that. And so this helps definitely drive people's perspectives through these steps of desperateness, the steps of despair.
Yeah, I agree. And I do just want to make one more comment about the quote. So it isn't that there's no right and wrong here. There's no right is what this individual is saying. It's interesting that he says, like, there's no right. Why? I wonder why he's saying, like, why he's not saying that there's no wrong. Mm-hmm. Did you notice that?
Yeah, it definitely, the second sentence ends abruptly. There's no right. And, it's weird that right has many definitions. Like, for whatever reason, left pops into my head automatically. It's like I have an association of right with left. But there's also rights, like a Bill of Rights, like things that you're allowed. And then there's right as in correct, or, so I think that's part of what's puzzling to me, is that I too am not exactly sure what there's no right is meaning beyond what we discussed.
Yeah, I'm actually wondering, now I'm having a different interpretation of the quote now that we're continuing to talk about it, which is great. It kind of simplifies to, like, there is no right answer. Mm-hmm. All of the science and knowledge that we have in this world, is it right? Is it correct?
Yeah. And Nate, who is on the third episode of Noble Innovation, he's background in immunology. He was describing how science is self-correcting, right? It's like, people can put out assertions, put out their findings using whatever tools exist in that time frame, that era, that field, which may be, and it often is, proven wrong decades later, right? And so I think that's a small kind of microcosm of the last couple hundred years of, like, modern science, for example. But in the grand scheme, realizing that, like, this information age and the use of computers is, like, around 50 years old relative to the many thousands of years that humans have been alive, and what information has been passed along throughout that time frame. And when you really begin to think, it's like we are obviously over obsessed with the things that can happen in our lifetime. And I think that that's a bias that all of us have. We like to think in the reference of what can happen within our lifetime and within our lifespan, and how can I understand things that will have direct relevance to me. Yeah, I think that proving things, like we've learned, is, we can try to get very reductionist and say, like, yes, something is composed of 3 atoms. And that, I think that many people might actually, agree with. Glucose has 6 carbons, right? That might sound like a fact. And, it's a reductionist approach because we were able to look at the number of atoms and, actually count them and use different tools to do it. But I guess the thought is then, what does that matter for? And I guess the building of knowledge is very important, and you need to have certain things that you unanimously agree on as humans in order to basically to live happily, right? Like, if people don't understand the same things that you do, then you might actually feel like you don't belong or don't have any identity. So I think that science is one way to ascribe universal understanding to a group of people so that we can function well as a cohesive society.
Yeah, I think it's a fine balance, right? Like, yes, these are our general understandings and the current knowledge out there, but I appreciate that this quote is saying to keep in mind that you can always challenge things, ask questions. Is this the right way that this molecule works, or this protein interacts, or, and even for me, as I was going into medicine, one of the most influential parts in my decision to go in psychiatry was when one of my mentors, who I rotated with, Dr. Mark Overton, he's a psychiatrist up in Maine. And I remember asking, I'm like, is this the right thing to do? And he's like, There is no right thing.
Uh-huh.
And he actually encouraged me. He purposely said, he's like, I really encourage you not to say right or like wrong.
Interesting.
When we're actually talking about how another individual's feeling, exploration, right? I loved that he encouraged more of just like, let's just like talk about like what's going on with this person and explore this person's life from different angles, from different perspectives. And, ultimately it's not like we're trying to come up with like, this is the right thing for them. Like, who knows? Like, we really don't know that.
And I'll just tie up my last thoughts on this quote too, as you were saying that, and focusing kind of on the right piece.
Yeah.
But if you compare this to the previous quote, this author doesn't give us much to go off of, right? It isn't that, there's no, and here, there's no. It's just right and wrong. Those are the only two things that actually provide any context, compared to conviction and enemy, and like Nietzsche gave us a lot.
Lies.
Gave us a lot more to chew on. So it's interesting how vague and broad this is. So really forces us to think of our perspectives and understanding of these particular contexts.
Yeah.
So let's get to the last one. So which one did you pick?
Yeah, so this last quote that I picked is by Edwin Moses. And this individual is a United States track and field athlete who was born in 1955. And for some reason, we don't know when this individual passed.
They might still be alive.
Oh,
right?
They might still be alive. That's true. Very valid. So the quote is, I don't really see the hurdles. I sense them like a memory. And I'll read it one more time. I don't really see the hurdles. I sense them like a memory.
This is awesome, because I think he describes a literal description of, I presume he probably ran hurdles,
right?
And a literal description that can be extrapolated to something like way bigger. And it looks like it's quoted within Bruce Jenner's Finding the Champion Within in 1996. So that's interesting. Like, I wonder if that's part of an interview, or if that's, like if Edwin Moses actually intentionally came up with that line to be more profound, or if this was just off the cuff. This is just how this person thinks. Like, if this was a subconscious response, that would be really interesting to know, because clearly if it is off the cuff, like a subconscious response, then that's just ingrained in this person's thought process, which is very interesting. And he probably goes through life experiencing this mindset as he comes across obstacles or hurdles, and realizes there's something there, but knows he can overcome them because he's done it so many times before in his practice.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm wondering. I would like to know more.
Yeah. No, I mean, I bet you this individual is obviously like did really well as an athlete. For that reason, you could just tell, right? If you are an athlete and you get to the point where you go in and you are doing something very difficult, a maneuver, whether it's like, snatching a really heavy weight in Olympic weightlifting, or whether it's like sprinting 100 meter, you are just doing that as second nature. You have practiced and rehearsed this so many times for years and years, if not like decades and decades of your life, that it is now second nature. And it's so much like second nature that it's actually, he refers to it as a memory, right? A distant memory, which is, I think, actually hilarious. That's a really good way to describe it.
And it's wild that he poses the simple concept that memories influence our immediate decisions, right? Memories that he might not even be thinking or philosophizing about have a direct impact on his decision to overcome this hurdle or overcome that barrier, right? Memories that maybe he'd never even realized at the time through his probably decades of practice that this would instill in him some approach to life, or a mindset or an approach to life. Or maybe it was intentional. Who knows? Do you know, have you come across any like mindset coaches or know anything about that?
Oh, I mean, I know they definitely exist for sure, and are probably very prolific. I would assume that every professional athlete has a mind coach at this point.
Yeah, it does seem like, if not, it could be really an untapped market. I mean, just realizing that there's a component that will help you determine how you're going to respond in every moment of your life. I mean, and I think that it's, there's this, I don't love the concept of optimization of everything. I think that optimization of your life within reason is very good. I think that just shaping your values might be a real goal of a mindset. Just like, what do you really want? What do you really care about? What do you really want? And how can we make sure that we set you up to be on a path that allows you to live within these values, regardless of what obstacles come up?
Yeah. I think that's really great. And I remember we were actually having a conversation not too long ago about Tiger Woods, right? And so you mentioned like having a mental coach, and I'm pretty sure you were the one telling me like he had some form of, I don't know if it was like a therapist, but I think he actually went to a place in which like his parents set him up to see somebody on a weekly basis, and make his mind basically impermeable to any form of negativity and to help him in his sport.
Yeah, I'll give you some context. So I heard about this in the Founders podcast episode on Tiger Woods. So he read Tiger Woods' biography written by, I forget who had actually written the biography, but he describes that Tiger's dad would send him to Walter Reed, so like the military hospital in DC, across from where we met at NIH.
That's right.
Which is funny. But it was basically a military psychologist who was training prisoners of wars. So like if a person ends up having to become a prisoner of war, how will they actually have the mindset that will allow them to stay sane, basically? And so I think that's what that concept was, which I can imagine just like a very challenging and rigorous psychological training.
Especially as a kid.
Right.
But and it's interesting, like, and I love how you said, optimization's good to an extent.
Right.
I mean, at the same time, like, it's hard, right? If you're a professional athlete, that is your job. That is what you're getting paid to do. That is what your fans want to see, right? For you to succeed, for you to be number one. It's an insane amount of pressure.
Yeah.
But if you kind of need every advantage that you can in order to get to that point. So you do need to you have to have the ability to reframe your perspective when you encounter barriers in life, that you're just going to persevere and get through them.
And I think part of really what really ensures like people that are trying to be at the top of their craft, like ensures them to keep going and getting better and going through, they do have to love it. There's this big, I've been seeing a lot about like, do what you love sort of thing, and not do what you love in place of hard work. It's just find something that you love so that your hard work is actually enjoyable, right? There's a grind no matter what you end up deciding to do with your life. And this is career, but it's also family. It's also where you live, if you have a chance to move or something like that. All of these decisions, like, there are hard decisions that you'll have to come across. Ideally, those hard decisions are things that you're actually excited to make. And I think that at the highest level, if you don't actually love it, that's not really a recipe for success. Because, if you listen to Founders podcast, he says a lot like, if someone is passionate and hardworking and just as smart as you, and this is like the one thing they want to do in the world, they will crush you. It's like, if they have all these things and they love it, right? How will you beat somebody like that? So I think that there's some importance in finding something that you love. And it seems like this guy, Edwin Moses, actually, this track and field athlete, probably loved the craft, right? If his mind automatically thinks about being on the track and going over hurdles and not even conscious, he's done it so much that it's subconscious at that point. Yeah. You got to think that he loved it.
I mean, I actually don't want to make that assumption. I feel like there are tons of people out there who who have practiced so much, right? Years and years and years, and they don't love it. But there's it's still second nature to them.
That's true.
Yeah. And I think, it's important to work hard at something and to encounter like hurdles and to be able to like go through those with grace, overcome those with grace. It's definitely a skill, but I don't think it's talked about enough on the opposite side of the spectrum of it's also a skill to learn how to rest and to make sure you're mentally okay. Like if you're always on, right? If you're always on right, and we have our autonomic nervous system, we have a parasympathetic, sympathetic. Parasympathetic is more for like resting. These are all just like kind of generalizations. Sympathetic is more active, right? Fight or flight type of situation. If we're always on and our sympathetic nervous system's always elevated, it can also cause some detrimental impact on our body.
Yeah, no, I'm wondering that now that you're saying that, was this guy on when he said that, or was this tucked in his subconscious? I think that it might sound like an on thing to say, like an intense thing to say, like I don't even see obstacles anymore. I just overcome them. Right. Exactly. But he could easily just be like laying on a couch with like a cigar saying like, oh, I mean, yeah, the hurdles, yeah, I don't see them. So it'd be interesting to really understand more about what he was thinking when he said that. And maybe we could assess, was this just part of his parasympathetic? His coolness is simply to to overcome obstacles, right? Like, that's, it's interesting.
Yeah. So that's all I have on my end about these quotes. I had a great time talking about these. So I think for our listeners moving forward, let us know what you liked about this. If you want us to do more quotes in the future, I think 3 was a pretty decent number, but you let us know if you want to hear more. And any recommendations moving forward. Totally.
And I will encourage you guys to, if you have a quote that you want us to react to, that would be very interesting.
Please send them.
I've been storing my quotes in an app called Craft. It's free. You can color it. It's actually really cool. I tried storing my quotes in like my iPhone notes section and it just got really disorganized. I think Notion is good for some people. You tried Google Keeps? Is that another way to do it?
Yeah. I feel like as of right now, I haven't really tried. This is Craft. Yeah, I would definitely be down to try Craft moving forward. I feel like I do need a more virtual way of storing my quotes, but I've been actually trying to do some like journaling and just kind of daily reflection at this point.
Nothing beats the old pen and paper, the old quill and papyrus scrap, right?
Exactly.
Thank you guys for tuning in, and please let us know if you have any more. You can find us on Instagram, the Noble Innovation Podcast, on YouTube or Spotify, and thanks for tuning in. Now go innovate.